Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Arik Housley. Arik is an author, speaker, entrepreneur, and advocate. For nearly 30 years, he has been a pillar of Napa Valley's business community, operating grocery stores, Housley Century Oak Winery, and the beloved Italian restaurant Il Posto Trattoria. He also owns Napa Valley 1839 FC, men's and women's soccer teams competing in national leagues built around a vision of family-friendly, soccer-centric entertainment. Arik's book, Always November, Lessons in Love, Loss, and Resilience, chronicles his family's journey through unimaginable grief and the search for hope after the tragic loss of his 18-year-old daughter, Alaina. 17-time best-selling author John Gordon praised the book, saying Housley's journey shows that even unimaginable grief can become a catalyst for growth. In Alaina's honor, Arik and his wife Hannah founded Alaina's Voice Foundation, which promotes kindness, empathy, and mental well-being through education, music, and community support, anchored by the motto, "Be the positive change." As a speaker, Arik combines vulnerability, humor, and authenticity to connect with audiences of all sizes. His heartfelt message encourages individuals and organizations to cultivate strength and compassion in the face of adversity. Arik, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been excited about our conversation for some time now.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
You're welcome. And we met, I believe it was through another mutual podcaster or friend of ours.
Through Terry. Yeah, through Terry.
That's right. In fact, Terry was the guy I just interviewed yesterday.
Oh, did you? Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful guy, a wonderful person, has a great story, and we had a really, really great conversation. So, yeah, we're talking about Terry Healy. So, and
his new book, Resilience Mindset, is done. And I really enjoyed it. It's especially for someone like himself, it's just such a different journey. You know, when you talk about resilience in my side, you know, and the loss of a daughter, it's different for somebody that's been, you know, you're young, you're in college, you're diagnosed with a very serious cancer in your face and like in your and then how you just kind of overcome that and not let it get you down is pretty awesome. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Dave. Terry's an inspiring guy, so I'm glad he introduced us.
Well, from what I've read about your background and from what you're doing in your community, you're a pretty inspiring guy yourself. So,
thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And I guess let's get right down to it. I want to take you to November 7th, 2018. Talk about the events of that day. How did the day start out and how did the day end?
You know, Alaina was a freshman at Pepperdine University. She was kind of a nerd. She hadn't had things go perfect at the start of the year, didn't get in the sorority she wanted and a few things. And then all of a sudden got into the Pepperdine Italy program, got into the mock trial program, all these little things that were going her way. And she was excited about kind of a future. And at Pepperdine, they have convocations. So that's either it's a once a week scenario because it's a Church of Christ affiliated school, or you can choose other ones. And there's certain ones that are like dinners with faculty where you get and you kind of discuss things. And so she had been at a friend of mine from when my wife and I both went to Pepperdine, a friend of ours, she was at his house. He's a religion professor. Other juniors, they all said, oh, go out, go to Borderline, go enjoy dancing. And so that night we encouraged her to go. And so yeah, we went to bed that night. Alaina had gone out blind dancing with friends in Thousand Oaks, California, deemed the safest city in America. And then about 12:36 in the morning, we got the phone call that nobody wants to get, that, you know, there's been a shooting. Chris actually was the religion professor that she had dinner with that night called. And he's like, there's been a shooting. There's a lot of chaos. We're still praying that she's okay. But we're still working on it. There's a lot of students, trying to figure out what's going on. Every kind of minute that ticked by from that point on was just kind of additional, like we knew right when the call came, you get that hunch or that feeling as a parent. It was like every second that ticked by, every minute that ticked by was just another clarification that this is real. So we turned on the news. The news was saying there was still chaos. He was possibly still inside. There was all these things going on. There was people hiding in the building. So I immediately started texting her and then realized, oh my gosh, if her phone's not on silent and it's beeping and this guy's going around shooting people, like, so obviously, messages that from me to Alaina, and like it got to a point where it started to repeat itself, like typical 24-hour news of today. And so my wife's like, I need you to turn it off. Like, this isn't good. And so we called our closest friends and they came over and were with us. And so, yeah, so actually November 7th really left everything. We went to bed, everything was great. And we woke up on November 8th, and that's when we started getting the information of what was going on.
Now, this is the Borderline Bar and Grill. So this was a popular Pepperdine University hangout.
Cal Lutheran and Pepperdine, even from when my wife and I were there, Elena's godfather performed it at Borderline back when we were there 25 years prior, right? So it had been around for a long time. It had moved locations one time, but yeah, that was a very popular, and that was the other students at the convocation that night said, oh, we've all been there. You got to go line dancing. It's so much fun. So she was just going out being a college student.
Yeah, it's just like in the space of 24 hours, everything changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked in our introductory call, and we shared our experiences. You knew about my daughter who died from cancer. And there are so many issues that are unique to cause of death, but the pain of loss is just the same. I mean, but you're talking about a sudden death, and particularly in the throes of a mass shooting. I mean, there's got to be some specific issues that you and your family really had to negotiate or deal with. What has the grief journey been like for you and your family and the challenges that you've experienced? Can you take us through the evolution of yours and your family's grief so far?
Dave, I think I tell people all the time when I'm speaking and stuff, I'm like, look, we don't need to rate our grief, whether mine was tragic and sudden. And there's parts where I look at you and go, gosh, how did you do it? Like, how did you do it and watch your daughter, like slowly go through that versus for us, it was just such a rapid event and so sudden. I mean, I've seen friends who've lost children like 3 and 4, and I'm going, oh, and I feel so fortunate to have had 18 years, yet some people look at me like, this is like the worst thing that could ever happen. And I'm like, it all sucks, just to be honest. Like it's just not awesome. And really we have this in our life that we are under the impression we're supposed to, like you're born, you grow up, you go to school, you get married, you don't have a kid before marriage. You don't, like there's all of these societal rules that we try to live by. And then you look at it and I still joke with our friends that we called that night and they had come over because him and his brother had 6 daughters, 3 and 3. There was 6 girls between all of the from Alaina, and then they're 5, 2 and 3. And so we used to joke around about, okay, who's going to be an alternative lifestyle? Who's going to be pregnant before marriage? Like those were the jokes between the 6 girls of us as parents when we were just having a glass of wine, just kind of, like poking each other and giggle. And to think that, gosh, I wish that was the worst case scenario. I wish that was something. And then when you look at it after, it's like they're still, whether they got pregnant before that society says they should, but they brought this life here and, it was a decision. And, so I think it's just kind of wrapping our heads around that the way we've grown up to know that this is the proper way to do things. As a family, I think we immediately kind of knew what was happening. And I can see how events of these would either tear families apart or push them together. And for us, we were fortunate that it pushed us together. We were very close. Our son was 14 at the time, and he was a rock for us in his own way. And we had gotten some very good advice to live in the moment, just be like, hey, if you're hungry, eat. If you're tired, sleep.
Yep.
On days that I would come home that I was having a tough day, I'd look at my son, and if he goes something wrong, I'd be like, yeah, I'm just missing your sister today. And because of this reminded me of her or something. And he's like, yeah, it was funny. I thought that too. So it was having that open door to process the grief, be present in the grief, really helped us in that journey. I can see why some people say like, oh, I just need some privacy right now. But I think people understanding the difference when people are going through this is privacy and isolation are two different things. Privacy is please don't put this all over the internet. Isolation is just leave them on an island and then they get stuck in their, because my moments, and I don't know about you, Dave, but my hardest moments were when my son was at school, my wife was at work, I got home at 2:30 and the house was quiet.
Yep.
And all of a sudden I'm sitting there like, okay, like it just made my thoughts started to go. And that's when I would start to feel the emotions coming. And I had to go like, okay, I don't want to let these go, but this is when it's hitting me. Was the quiet. So imagine if I didn't have my wife or my son here for at least part of the time during the day, it's 24/7 of isolation. Or, like somebody I know lost their son tragically, and she was sitting in her room in a dark room. She made a little altar to him and had candles going and such. And it was how she was processing the grief. But I looked at her at one point and I said, I'm just going to say this is you have a younger child you have to live for, and you have a husband in a relationship. And, sitting in this dark room is not going to make it easier. This isn't what your son would want. And she's gone on to do great things on helping the community and doing things around the type of death that he went through. And so she's given back, and the family's great. But I can imagine how some people, if nobody says that to them,
Mhm.
then, it's hard to pull them out of that dark hole. And for me, sadly, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, able to say those things. I can say things to you, Dave, about grief that others, if they asked you straight out, you might take a slight offense to it, right? Not intentionally, but you might be like, who are you to ask me that? But the typical person that's lost someone, if a random person says, oh, I'm sorry, how are you? Well, a lot of times they want to turn and go, how the F do you think I am?
Yeah.
Versus if you say it to me and I know you've lost your daughter, you're like, hey, Eric, how are you today? Like, or how are you? I'm like, you know how this can feel. The days come in waves. And my reaction is the exact same question, but different response, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because of its context. We both know each other's history. We both know that how are you is different meaning when you've lost a child or experienced another life altering tragedy. So,
Right.
um, but you mentioned kind of about the linearity of our lives. There's a certain milestones we're expected to achieve in order. We go to
Mhm.
we go to high school, we graduate, we find the love of our lives, we get married, we have kids, our kids get older, the parents get older, we have grandchildren. Life is great. And I was under this impression, and I never said this, I think openly, Eric, but I thought it in my actions. I said, if I live a good life, if I treat animals and children well, if I don't cheat on my wife, God's going to see this and he's going to spare me any potential tragedy that could ever occur. Well,
Yes.
first of all, I started experiencing tragedy when I was 5 years old. So that line of thinking or action was kind of flawed to begin with, but I acted in that way as if I did this, it would be kind of a prophylactic against any life altering tragedy occurring. But God in the universe sometimes has a different plan. And when my daughter got sick, and then she was 18, the same age as Alaina when
Mhm.
she passed, when she got sick, and then she died 10 months after giving birth to her first child. Which when you
Mhm.
talk about the pregnancy piece, I
Mhm.
tell my students at Utica University, and my female students is directed to, if you get pregnant out of wedlock and your dad thinks that's the worst possible thing that could ever happen to you, give him my phone number, have him call me. By the time I'm done with him,
Yeah.
he's going to be loving you up, because the
Yeah.
worst thing that happened isn't that you got pregnant. The worst thing that could happen is that you die before you see your child grow up and
Yeah.
that he experiences that pain.
Yeah.
So if, so that's, I may tell him, I said, look, there's a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's not a solution to death.
No. And it's funny that you say that because I remember during COVID, one parent, I mean, there are plenty of parents, and I understand it. It was a really funky time and the lockdowns, and it was hard on a lot of the mental health of many people in America and around the world. But I had somebody trying to go, this is the worst thing that could happen to our children ever because they weren't going to get to graduate. And I just looked at him and I'm like, are you are you seriously saying that to me right now? Like, I remember them saying it to me and I'm going, I don't mean to I mean, let's put this in perspective. It sucks. Okay. Your son doesn't get to walk the stage. Your daughter doesn't get to walk the stage. Life will move on. And the good news is you'll get to see them walk again tomorrow and the next day. And so let's put this into just a little bit of perspective. I don't know, David, have you ever seen the Anderson Cooper, Stephen Colbert interview? I
Yes.
mean, when Stephen Colbert kind of says that, like, what are not gifts of God? All of them, right? I mean, and I would ask this in a way of you, and not intended to offend in any way, but there's those times where I look at it for my purpose, where I go, gosh, if it were a cancer or something where it's like you had that time to say what you wanted to say, imagine the people that didn't say it and then they have to live with they didn't say it. So I really encourage people to say, like, hey, we don't know if tomorrow's not promised for any of us.
No.
So make sure you tell them that you love them and be open to the fact that they might want to do things a little different than you had planned for them. I mean, even when you went through the get married and have grandchildren, I mean, some people now, I'm amazed at how many people now are going like, I don't think I'm really wanting to have children. We're going to get married. We want to travel. We want to do, and I'm like, okay. And some people could look at that as it's a selfish lifestyle, but I look at it and go like, but it's yours to be. Like, our job is to spread love and light and to help people in this journey, not to tell them how they're supposed to live it. Right. Some of those milestones, I don't know for you too, because you said your daughter passed obviously young as well. But for me, it's very difficult. Like weddings, our daughter Elena's best friend is getting married this summer, and to another friend that they were all like the three of them were buddies all in high school. And I'm going to be a mess just to see it. And it's nothing against her. It's just one of those where, and I've already told her, I go, I'm going to be a mess, right? Like, because I don't get to experience that. I don't get to walk her down the aisle, right? And so I'm going to be super excited for Maria, but it's, it's still going to be an emotional moment for me. And I'm okay to own that.
Yeah, when my daughter's best friend got married, and she practically lived at our house, and she was like another daughter to me growing up. She was getting married, and my wife Sherry and I were excited about going to the reception. But when I got there, Eric, it was like I saw my daughter's friend, and she started crying when she hugged me, and I knew why she was crying. And from then on, I just like we ate and we left. And I was happy to obviously celebrate for the time that I was there in
Yeah,
their union,
of
but
course.
I was expecting to stay longer. But when I saw her and she started crying, that just did it. We
Yeah.
stayed for about an hour and we took off. And I tell individuals I've companion, show yourself some grace, give yourself some
Yeah.
flexibility. If you were going to go to an event that was meaningful to your daughter or to your son or to your loved one, and you find out that emotionally you can't stand there, stay there, give yourself permission to leave and let
Yeah.
individuals know beforehand that, look, if I'm leaving, it's not you, it's me, because I need to do what I need to do to take care of myself because
Yeah.
the moment's too overwhelming. So yeah, I mean, all those milestones I've gone through,
Yeah.
and it's been over 22 years, but there'll be other events that I'll still go through. But at 22 years down the road, I know how to manage that. I realize now this is part of the life that I'm going to be living, is experiencing joy
Right.
and sadness, joy and yearning, happiness and sadness. So all of those are going to exist at the same time. So I've kind of learned to accept that and integrate that. So I always do this, Eric, with every guest that I have
Okay.
who's lost someone near and dear to them. So tell our audience about Alaina. First of all, I got to tell you,
Well,
the picture that you sent me, she is just stunning. She's a very beautiful girl. So
yeah.
so
Yeah.
tell us what we need to know about Alaina so that we get to know her.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, she gets it from her mother. So it's funny, my wife is of Filipino descent, but she's taller and fair complected. So nobody believes she's full. So Elena got like her mom's features, but my coloring kind of a thing. So we would joke around. about it. And no, she was beautiful inside and out. She was always one. It was funny after her passing, hearing the stories of so many people saying, like one spoke, his name was Jack. He wanted to speak at the memorial. And he said, I was at school, I was new to the school, I was struggling, I didn't have any friends, I didn't know what to do. And I was sitting on a bench and Alaina just plopped right down next to me and she's like, hi, I'm Alaina, and just introduced herself and then said, oh, here. And she was like, you want to meet my friends? And so she took them and they met friends. And then all of a sudden they were all like just one more to the bunch. And we heard that quite frequently. I actually got a really cool message, and this kind of tells a little story about her. Another similar story was I was probably, it might have been the next year that I went down to Pepperdine. And before I did, because we would go every year around that time, there were some events that they were doing, tree dedications and some things. And somebody reached out to me on Facebook Messenger, and it was a random person that I didn't have contact with, but they messaged and said, I'm so and so. I lost my brother in a tragic accident, in a skateboarding accident. He was a freshman at San Luis Obispo the next year. And she said, I just wanted to reach out to you and tell you how much it meant to me when you spoke at the memorial and how much I heard the messaging. And it really has helped me while I've been grieving. And we got to talking, and she said, what's funny is she said, I met Alaina the week before she died. And I was sitting at the Starbucks. So Starbucks, I believe, at Pepperdine University, I think is the largest Starbucks in the world because it's part of the library. So the entire library is technically the Starbucks, which is not real, but they can, haha, it's the largest Starbucks. Anyway, she goes, I'm at the Starbucks, I'm sitting there. I was really feeling homesick. And Alaina just sat down next to me and introduced herself. And she had this big old like ice blended something and just started talking to me and really made me feel comfortable in that moment. And it was really nice to have a friend because I was feeling so lonely and homesick. And so I just, how she just kind of met me really meant a lot to me. And then we started meeting. So Hannah or Alaina my wife was a teacher at the local high school for leadership and activities. And Alaina was one of those students that would go and do campus tours for people coming on. We started meeting all of these families that were like, Alaina did our tour. She was amazing. She was so friendly. She was outgoing. And then after the death, we went into her room and there were quotes that she had written all over her mirror and different things. And the quotes were so thought provoking on appreciating life while you had it. Like almost every one of them, where we're like, did she know she was going to die young? Like it was almost intuitive, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, like one of the ones I think was from Harry Potter that's like, those who love us never leave us. Mm, And as something like just a lot of those types of things. And I think I actually put them in my book. Like I put some quotes to mark spaces on there at times of some of the ones that she had written out there. So yeah, as an individual, she was outgoing, super friendly, never wanted to miss out. If she had 2 parties, 3 parties to go to, and it was all like birthday parties and they were all at the same time. Even when she was like 10, she was like distraught that she couldn't, like she was going to miss out, almost like she knew her time was short, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, it was just very, rarely did you ever hear something unkind come out of her mouth, even though I'm sure there's times where it had gone through her head. But avid reader and yeah, just really, really outgoing in that way.
Yeah, it sounds like her life made an impact on so many people and probably more that you probably don't even know of at this point. But I'm sure, whatever she did to spread kindness to one person who needed it, that person probably in turn did the same for somebody else. And it was all because of the actions that Alaina initiated. So it's interesting that you said, did she possibly have a premonition? It was interesting for me because my daughter 2 years before she had cancer, and I found this out after she died, asked my wife what's it like to have cancer. And so there is a part of me in terms of looking back, reflecting is that she may have known. Um,
Yeah.
she may have known that her time was short. I've heard other stories from other individuals
Mhm.
who and other parents who have learned that their children may have said things that indicated that hey, I'm only here for a short period of time, but
Hmm.
I'm going to make a great impact for the time that I'm here. Um,
Hmm.
it isn't consolation to those parents, obviously, but it gives some perspective that,
Yeah.
sometimes we come into this world knowing that this is going to be a short stop.
Yeah. And I mean, who's to say different, right? I talk about it in my book of kind of the signs that we saw and things that happen. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, whether you believe in them or you don't believe in them, that's your prerogative. But for
Mhm.
me, if it's something that makes you smile, like even if you turn and go, every time I see a penny on the ground, it makes me remind me of my dad. And somebody that's skeptical can go like, that's stupid. There's pennies all the time. Okay. But if it makes you smile and think about your father, if it makes you smile every time you see a hummingbird, and it makes you, Dave, think of your daughter,
Mhm.
that's nobody else's business. If it makes you smile, that's just a memory and an
Mhm.
opportunity to do it. Now, if you connect to that in your own way, that's totally different. But for other people that are skeptics, I'm like, okay, so you don't want me to feel a connection to my daughter when
Mhm.
something I see. You can be skeptical all you want. I feel sad for people when they're that adamant that
Mhm.
this is just not possible because they can't fathom what we don't. And what I do understand, and this is kind of my understanding of how life has changed, is I used to think faith and religion were the same. And now I really realize as well, they're correlated. They're also very different.
Yep.
You can have faith in relationships, right? You can have faith that you're going to get home on your drive home tonight when you're tired or XYZ. Um, but there's the concept of those. I used to think that everything that is tangible that I can sense, touch, feel, taste, smell was real. And everything outside of that, I just didn't know. Like I just assumed it wasn't. And now I look in my concept, and it was because of religion where I looked and I go, I have friends that are Catholic, atheists, Mormon, Christian, you name it, every different religion or non. And many of them, they're extremely smart people. And I used to think, well, everybody's wrong except for one of them. Right. And now my mindset is the opposite, where it's like, well, what if none of them are around? What if we're all on our own journey?
Mhm.
Just like you and your teaching journey and what you're doing. Well, you're on that journey, and whatever that looks like for you and how you're helping others is your journey. And who am I to tell you how that's supposed to be? Right.
I can't consensually validate your subjective experience. I can't say that, no, you didn't have that experience because I'm not in your skin. But what
Yep.
I can do is understand, what did that experience do for you? What were you thinking of at the time? Were you thinking of Alaina when you saw the butterfly or the cardinal, whatever you have associated,
Right.
symbol as a
Right.
sign from her? Did you find peace? Did you feel peace? How did you feel after you experienced this? What have you learned from this experience that you could take moving forward in your grief? My job, Eric, isn't to judge it. My job is to understand it and see what I can take away from it. And at the
Mhm.
same time, reflect on what your account of that experience did to change my perspective of things or enhance my perspective of things. The path to redefining ourselves or repurposing ourselves after grief is going to be different. We're going to walk the same path, but we're going to do it differently. And
Mhm.
however we do it, as long as we're not hurting anybody or somebody, who am I to say that, no, your path is wrong?
Right. Right. And I mean, I loved it. One of the people that was on my podcast, she married to a pastor who's no longer a pastor, but still a believer. And I was just talking to her about them and their journey. And she introduced me to Richard Rohr, who I read. He was talking about, and as a Catholic theologian, is probably how I would lightly categorize him, but very intelligent. He's like, who am I to tell the Buddhist monk who's done nothing but spread love and light to people that he's going to hell? Like that's not, like that doesn't work. And for me, that doesn't work for me. That's just too hard. And I believe that God is all knowing and all loving, that he's not turning going, yeah, you were born in a Rwandan slum and died of malaria at 2. You didn't become Christian. Sorry. Peace out, homie. That just doesn't work for me. And I can respect the people that it does, that's how
Mhm.
they define it. I'm not judging that. It doesn't, I can't wrap my head around that, because to me, it's more of the whole approach to me.
Yep.
I look at it and I go, I'm not one to judge your journey. Like you're doing this the way you have to do this. For me, I just like to encourage conversations to help people in their journey move forward. We never move on, right? We move forward. People ask me all the time, oh, it must be so nice, like writing the book or Alaina's Voice Foundation, that you're keeping her name alive. It must be very cathartic. And I look at him like, honestly, for me, it's not. I'm not doing it to make people, you could have called her Aliana. I may have corrected you just for purposes of doing it, but it's not because I need people to know how to pronounce her name properly or to know that she liked dark chocolate. Like for me, it's more of how do we take what we've learned and help others in their journey. I was speaking at a conference recently, and there were people that were like handing out buttons. Here's my, remember his name, remember his name, remember his name. And that's their journey. And that's okay. But for me, I look at it and go, okay, so I have a button now. I know his name was Brandon, but I look at it and go like, that's not helping me. If that's helping them, that's okay. That's helping them. But in the end, to me, sometimes those are band-aids on bullet holes. Sorry for the analogy based on how my daughter died, but it's one of those, like, it's not solving that. It's one of those. And for you, like at this point, you still haven't said your daughter's name once in an entire podcast, not because you don't love and respect and miss her, but because you're helping people in their journey, right? And same for me is it's so fulfilling to try to help others talk about it. I know now I've reached out to Brown University because of the recent shooting that was there. My intention is to try to help communities and individuals and leadership teams how to talk about things like this, like the fear of what's happening or what has happened, or because a lot of times people try to compartmentalize, and sometimes these conversations really help certain individuals. Some people are introspective, others are not. And so I just feel it's really important to communicate and to be open for conversations. And sometimes you have to be like, okay, thanks, I'm going to go now. And because sometimes those turn a certain direction, right? So,
Yeah, it depends on the situation. If there's selective response, people and they want to talk or talk in groups or be open with what's going on, or other times they just got to take care of themselves and say, no, I don't have the energy to revisit this and I need to do something else for the moment. So, just
right.
you just meet people, I guess, where they're at. And yeah, I wanted to ask you in terms of the whole community piece. And one of the things I talk to my students about in my death, dying, and bereavement class, particularly after mass shootings, is something we call social consolidation after death, where communities will bond together, they will support each other. And also, I guess, the norms and the rules that govern those communities as far as safety, as far as a whole things change. After after the shooting at the Borderline Bar and Grill, how did your community, the other communities affected, come together? What were the differences in those communities pre-shooting? And what do you see now in the differences of how those communities support and relate to each other and how they view life individually and as a community since the shooting?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we probably were the outlier. I would assume there was two outliers for Borderline. Sergeant Ron Helis, who was the one officer that went in that lost his life going in to try to take the shooter, and lost his life in friendly fire from the CHP officer as Sergeant Helis fell. And then the second one was us. Alaina was the youngest, and we didn't live in the community. So there was a lot of things in Thousand Oaks. Thousand Oaks as a community was amazing. They had a whole garden put in. They had these huge stones put in, this water feature, a big memorial. They gave and did and provided. And I mean, it was unbelievable. So you had the Thousand Oaks community. We had the law enforcement community. We were given a victim's advocate and then a detective, and they were our contacts. They were awesome. I actually just spoke to someone a couple of days ago about speaking at the National Advocacy Victims Advocate Center or annual conference. They were amazing too, because for us, we weren't interested in any of the details. So we were, I believe, the only family that did not partake in the police report of how the shooting went, who was where, what happened, when it happened. And for us, it was because when I would wake up with nightmares of Alaina murdered, I knew those were my brain making these scenarios, but I didn't see it for real. So in my scenario, I was fortunate enough not to witness what happened. So people that witness these things, obviously it's different for them in their journey. But for me, I didn't have that. So we had the advocacy side, and our detective that was affiliated with us, he was awesome and became a very close friend. And then we had the Pepperdine community, because this is where Alaina was, who was extremely supportive. And we had the Napa Valley community as well. And all of them just in their different ways. Napa Valley, there was a procession when she was brought home. One of the most emotional moments for my wife and I was a longtime friend of mine and his brother, who's now our sheriff here in town, had asked for permission. They drove to Thousand Oaks, California, and escorted her body home. One was a sheriff, one was a Napa PD. They got permission from their bosses. They drove down, slept for 2 hours, and then escorted the hearse back from Thousand Oaks as her body was transported up here. There was just so many things that people did that were wonderful gifts that we just had to learn to accept because they wanted to do that. The communities were amazing. There was a lot of artwork. We could have filled our entire 3,000 square foot home with art in every single room of Alaina, pictures of Alaina. Some of them were scary, like the way people portrayed her, but it was also, I believe that it was out of kindness. I think even the dumb comments that people would say, I still believe that most of them were with intent to say something that probably would make them feel better in that moment and trying to relate. So I try to allow those things in without judging. The communities were amazing. They really went out of their way for us in so many ways, and we were very fortunate with that.
Yeah, it sounds like they all came together and really support shared grief. And I would suspect, and I'm sure you've probably seen this, communities are forever changed because of a mass shooting. Have you seen where the borderline bar and grill is still very much in the forefront of those communities, where those communities' minds, and every year do they
Yeah.
recognize that day?
Yeah, they still do events. I mean, a little bit less now, but every year they still do some sort of event, like a healing event or something at the garden. We went the first year very quickly when they did the garden dedication, but most of it, we haven't been super connected there. We went more to Pepperdine, which is where we were. We never went to Borderline because it had moved from when we were in college. So we never even knew the location. The bar and grill ended up getting torn down a few years ago. So there was a lot of like people that were saying we can't tear it down, and others saying please tear it down because it was such a bad memory. So yeah, I mean, there's just so many different ways, but all of them, especially Thousand Oaks, continue to honor it year after year, and they still do. Pepperdine did for a couple years while her classmates were there, and once they were done at the end of the fourth year, then it was kind of like, okay, they've graduated and moved. Then we kind of stopped those ceremonies. So yeah, for the most part, they've been very supportive. And yes, they do definitely come together. Thousand Oaks, you'll still see a strong type of messages, or Borderline, the 12 victims. So yeah, it's one of those things as communities really do come together around those.
Yeah, and those mass shooting events become part of that community's history,
Yeah.
and that's one of the realizations of that. I mean, if you look at any of the mass shootings, I think somehow the memories of those don't go away. I think they in some way drive how communities relate to each other, and
Mhm.
what they do moving forward. But let's talk. I want to shift to talk about your book for a bit. Always
Okay.
November. Tell
Yep.
us about the book. I know Elena's picture is on the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can, like I mentioned, put that up again, Eric,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, looking at her picture, if you saw a picture of my daughter Janine, and I'll have to send you one. I'll have to
yeah.
email you one. The features are very, very similar. Um,
Yeah.
very dark features and the higher cheekbones and everything. It's kind of uncanny. I mean, they don't look like sisters from another mother, but
Yes.
there's similarities in facial features that.
Yeah.
But I will send you one so you can compare.
Yeah.
So
I'd love it.
tell us about the book, Always November.
So yeah, so Always November, Lessons in Loss, Love, and Resilience. I had found myself speaking to a lot of people that had lost children, friends that had reached out and said, "Hey, can you talk to so and so, or can you talk to this person?" And while I actually am very fulfilled to do it, my wife saw, like, Eric, you're like, this is exhausting. Sometimes it's very emotionally draining. Sometimes, as you know, when you talk to some people, and she's like, "Have you considered a book?" And then other people kind of kept saying that. And so I finally was like, you know what, let's give it a shot, because a random event, and it's in the book, of how it came about. And so it's divided into two parts. It basically doesn't talk about the shooting at all. It basically is from the time we got the first chapter is called The Call. At 12:36 in the morning, we get the phone call, and it goes through what happened, like the events that happened after. And then so the first half is the unthinkable, and the second half of the book is called The Thinkable, and that's kind of the new. It's centered around post traumatic growth. If I would assume you're familiar with PTG, which is what we feel we've gone through that process, is the new relationships, spirituality, personal strength, all of those kind of things that started to come together. So it was the stories in and around that that kind of helped in our journey. And then the last chapter, it was kind of, we just for fun, we did some FAQs, and my son answered quite a few questions too. Cause a lot of people, when I'm speaking, will say, well, how did your son do this? Like, he was 14. How did he respond? And so he responded to quite a few of the questions that pertain to him, of being it that they were questions that people had been asking him since the time of, people say, oh my gosh, how does it feel to have lost your sister? Like, what, are you mad? Or, and he, whatever the question was, and he responds. So that was really fun to incorporate him in that way. I got #1 new release when it released, and then bestseller in multiple categories. It's done much better than I could have imagined. So I'm very fortunate with that. I got a really great message. And that's how I ended up on the phone with the victim's advocate a couple days ago. She sent a very kind email. I've got some great emails of people giving me responses of how it's been for them in reading it. And hers was, she had responded to Route 91 and responded to Borderline as a victim's advocate. And she said, the things that I learned from your book and the things that were said in there were things that really should have been said. As people that are going through this and helping people go through this, are things that were in my head, but I didn't know how to express them and the way you put them out there. And so she just sent a really nice message of how much it helped her process it and how much she appreciated the book in that way. And I mean, in the end, Dave, we all have grief, right? In some way in our life. And if we haven't yet, if you're 35 and you haven't even lost a grandparent yet, you will. And so it's what to say. It's kind of learning how to communicate around it and such. And so, yeah, it's been very, very exciting. So,
Yeah, it sounds like it's a very impactful book, and it's going to be a very impactful read for anybody who picks it up. And yeah, I think it's so important too to teach individuals or suggest individuals, this is how you hold space for somebody who's grieving. This is what you say. This is what you don't say. And I think you alluded to earlier, I think most people intend to be compassionate when they say what's in their heart, but
mhm.
they may not realize, because of lack of knowledge or because of what they thought was comforting,
Mm.
they may not realize that in some way they're unintentionally undermining the grief experience of a parent or another individual's experienced a traumatic loss. So I think that's
Absolutely.
important to show individuals how to hold space for that. Um, Alaina's Voice Foundation. Tell
Yes.
us about how that came about, what the mission is of Alaina's Voice Foundation,
Yeah.
how that is an extension of what you're doing to help communities and individuals get through trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So the murder was so we found out Thursday morning, early in the morning. We went down there. What you don't know, and you'll read it in the book, is we got there, we found out at 11 a.m. We went to the chapel, we spent the day. That night, the Woolsey fire broke out, and it was going straight to Malibu. So Woolsey fire blew through without, like, the Calabasas Hills straight towards Pepperdine. And so we were evacuated at 5 a.m. I just remember thinking, like, what is next? Like, you got to be kidding me. So we were woken up at 5 a.m., had to evacuate. It had been barely 24 hours since we'd heard our daughter's murder. And so we evacuated and then flew home on Saturday. And then when we got home, I believe it was either ABC or CBS, one of them came for national news and did an interview with myself. My brother and sister-in-law were in television. My sister-in-law's been in a lot of movies, Hallmark movies and stuff over the years. And my brother was with Fox News forever, for like 12 years as a reporter, traveling all over the world. And so we ended up on this newscast. And at the very end of it, they asked me a question. I just said, mark my words, Elena's voice will be heard. And I don't know why I said it, like, right. And then a friend of my wife's from Pepperdine, had started a GoFundMe, and we didn't know it. And it ended up raising like $150,000. Well, my wife and I are like, well, we need to do something with this that will help others. And we didn't feel that we needed to be, I mean, Timothy McVeigh didn't need a gun to kill 250 people at the Oklahoma Federal Building. So while guns are a problem in our country, we need to figure out how to find people and spread kindness and head this off at the pass. And so we basically started the foundation to promote education, music, and mental health initiatives. And then that slowly has become where we're doing a lot of what we call bridge therapy. People that are 17-year-old teen, third attempted suicide, and Kaiser says that, well, we can't get you in for 30 days. So we're like, hey, call this number. We'll get you a therapist until they can get. So we bridge that gap for them, PTSD veterans and others. And they kind of happen by happenstance. It's a long story, but we do a lot of bridge therapy to try to give back 100% of what we raise goes back to the Napa community. Now we've actually spread into the Santa Rosa, Sonoma Valley as well to do some mental health services there. And so basically we pay local practitioners who give us a slightly reduced rate to try to, because they believe in our mission. And these are for people that just can't afford it. So it's kind of like, here you go, here's the mental health services you need. So it's become a lot of victims of violence. And then we've just recently launched something called Alaina's Bridge that is intending to get violent offenders, hopefully, and pull them out to change their trajectory, grab them and go like, hey, we know you've gone down this path and it's going this direction, but we feel like there's a way to get you saved back in this way, because today's offended, the children are tomorrow's offenders. And so if we can change the trajectory of one family at a time, then hopefully we can start to change something, even if it's just that little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, change begins with small steps. So if you can change the trajectory of one family, I believe that has a trickle-down effect. What they've learned from working with you and other members or benefactors for um, Elena's Voice Foundation, they're going to take that and they're going to pass it on to somebody else. And the bottom line, Eric, is anything that I leave that's positive as a result of Janine's death, um, anything that I can leave positive, if that can continue on long after I'm gone, then I've succeeded in this life to do what I wanted to do. Well, yeah, it sounds like between the book and between your own speaking engagements and working individually with individuals who are grieving, you're doing some very, very impactful work.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, the other thing, I got to talk to you about your podcast. I know that your podcast is the second half of the title of your book, which is Lessons in Loss, Love, and Resilience. So tell us about the podcast. Tell us about how you started it, who you feature, what message you want to leave individuals with who listen to it, about life and loss, and just anything in general.
I think ultimately it's not only about grief and the loss of a loved one. Alaina's Voice website builder, who's a friend from college, suffered a spinal cord injury riding his bike. So going from a healthy Ironman triathlete to a chair triathlete, healthy, but now in a chair and having to change his lifestyle. One woman who was diagnosed with HIV back in the 80s from a blood transfusion during giving birth, and how she lost her community, but she's 39 years later, still doing well. But then, the majority of them are around somebody who lost a loved one and how they got through that journey, and just having real conversations with individuals around grief and the grief journey. I try to keep it very real. I don't have a scheduled podcast time. It kind of comes up when it does. I think I've done about 15 episodes now. I just post them on arikhousley.com. I do have a Substack as well that they're on there, but most of it, I just push it through my website, which is how most people get a hold of me if they want me to do some speaking. The book's available on Amazon, as well as some local ones here in the valley, in Napa Valley. I didn't really go out and try to do that. I wasn't about trying to get the book sold everywhere, because most of the time it's around the story, when people hear about the story. And that's when they're interested in knowing and reading the book. So it's been more to just try to help be fulfilling in that way. And that's where Lessons in Loss, Love, and Resilience kind of came out of that. It just came out of the ashes. And it was a way for me to try to help people just feel comfortable and have. I've been surprised at how many men are actually going, oh, I listen to your podcast. And I'm like, really? Like, mostly men are so shut off to the journey, as you and I know, Dave. And I think it's been fun. It's nice to help people in this way.
Yeah, it is. And, I think your podcast is an extension of the service work you're doing in honor of and with Alaina. And my podcast ended up being an extension of the service work that I'm doing in honor of and with my daughter, Janine. So I think there's I tend to have individuals on the program, not only who have transcended loss, but who have something to share that they've worked with individuals who have transcended loss. Any coaches that have tools that they wish to share and they're willing to teach. And every time I have a podcast guest, I am the student and they are the teacher. So, and I think in light of that, I'm going to ask you, and you've left our audience with so many good things today from your journey, from your book, from everything that you do. But if you're going to leave our audience with one ultimate takeaway today, Eric, what would that be?
Oh, I'd say have those conversations. Like if you really had it out with your brother and you both have dug your feet in and you both are so busy being right, like in the end, in your last day, doesn't really matter. Now, sometimes people are going to answer and say, like, yeah, it really does. With what you did to me really hurt me. And I can never accept that. And I've said that to him. Okay, then you've said what you needed to say, right?
Yep.
But there's a lot of people that just don't have those conversations. And, no day is promised. So tell your loved ones that you love them. And if somebody hurt you and you'd like to make amends from it, be like, hey, I just want to let you know this really hurt. But I'd like to try to put it behind us. Like, can we move forward with it? And if they can't get around it, you at least know you can go knowing,
Yep.
well, I tried, right? It's one thing to say you tried. It's another to actually try. And I think that's where people, so I just say what you got to say, because in the end, those are the little things that really you're going to look at and go, did that really matter as much as I made it out to be? Or did I let this ego side of me just get so big and frustrated and trying to prove I was right? One of my mentors told me, he goes, and it's one of the 4 fatal fears, and I won't get into all of it, but one of them is, have you ever known you were wrong mid like conversation or argument, and realized you might be wrong and continued to argue it? And he goes, that's our ego, right? So whatever that is it's get the things you need to say what you need to say. And because in the end, none of that's going to matter. We're just a blip in a very long time scale in this world.
That's it. And a lot of times I've seen, and Eric, individuals will have regret after somebody has died that, geez, I wish I hadn't left this unsaid. I wish I had told them how I really felt. Or, boy, the feud that we had seems to be so minuscule now compared to the gravity of the situation that I'm looking at. I think if we could teach individuals to envision a time where that person you're having an issue with and you care about is no longer a part of this universe.
Right.
Take yourself to that time.
Yeah.
Envision how you're going to feel when you've had things that you haven't said, you've left unsaid, and ask yourself, do you want to feel that way, or do you want to do something about it now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, forgiveness is so liberating, right? And even if you forgive somebody and they were the ones that did it wrong, but you were able to forgive them and move on. I've forgiven the shooter. Like, I look at it and go, I don't know what got him where he was at, that he chose to do that, because it doesn't change. I can't take that anger with me everywhere I go, because that's not going to make it better. Do I miss her? Absolutely. But I've forgiven the shooter to know that I don't allow that to consume me in that way. I feel bad that it got to a point that that's where he was in his life, that's what he wanted to do, and hurt so many families. And I hope that we can change that for the next person down the road, because the shootings continue to happen. And hopefully someday we can see that starting to lessen rather than increase like we have.
Yeah, that would be my hope. That would be my prayer for this country, that mass shootings do not become normalized and they become less frequent and they become eliminated.
Yeah. For sure.
Eliminated. I know you mentioned your contact information earlier with the book, your website. Any other contact information you want to share with us, especially with the podcast, if people want to subscribe or follow the podcast?
Yeah, that's all. I mean, the podcast, all of the ones are on YouTube, but they're on my website. Like, you can click on my website and then each of the episodes are right on there. So yeah, it's super simple. I'm not on a podcast subscriber where you have to go on and subscribe or pay for it or anything. I just want to do it because I enjoy it. Yeah, it's just arikhousley.com. You'll find everything, except my name is spelled funny, so they have to look at that, Arik. And it's not a house in Housley. There's Housley, and there's no E after the S. So yeah, it's one of those, just having it out there for people, and that's the easiest way is right through the website.
And I'll make sure your contact information gets in the episode notes, when our podcast goes live. So with that, Arik, thank you so much for spending time with me today and our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you for just a great conversation. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Dave.
My pleasure. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.